There are a couple of vegan activists who are calling Sadhguru fake because he did not say the dairy industry should be stopped while answering to a question, and also he made some jokes.
Vegans, are you tired of being hated and reviled by Christians, Muslims, and Jews? Guess what? There are also hundreds of millions of Hindus who hate you just as intensely, maybe more. And why? For the same reason the vast majority of Buddhists hate you. And I would know, because I'm vegan. If there's one thing that morally self-righteous, profoundly spiritual people can't stand, it's someone else with a competing notion of what is morally self-righteous, especially if their reasoning is more profound. The case study today is a Hindu leader named Sadhguru. He's got tens of millions of views on YouTube for video, and he's got many dozens of millions of followers. Sadhguru's rationale for why you should be vegetarian but not vegan is actually pseudoscientific in the most classical sense of pseudoscience. The reasoning he sets out for you is that if you eat cow meat, it contains DNA, and that DNA never fully leaves your system. Somehow the cow DNA interacts with yours. It never occurs to these people how totally counterproductive this kind of scientific reasoning would be if it were true. Don't you think there are track and field athletes who would run out the door right now and kill and eat a hyena if they thought they had one chance in 1,000 of getting a little bit of hyena DNA in to run that a little bit faster? No? Don't you think there are a lot of kids who want to be Spider-Man who'd start eating spiders? Don't you think there are all kinds of dudes who try to drink lion blood? If you actually believe this horseshit that you're going to get the DNA of the animals you eat, it's going to alloy with your DNA and change your nature and give you all kinds of physical and spiritual traits. It's going to transform who you are eating meat. People would be into that. If there were any truth in it, if there were just a slight difference, if men could just get slightly more muscular or slightly more aggressive by eating gorilla steaks, there would be drive-through gorilla burgers from America from coast to coast. Are you kidding me? So his theory is taking a common old wives' tale that somehow eating meat changes your character through hormones, and he's kicking it up a notch. He's changing that it's genetic. But what do you know? For some equally ludicrous reason, Sadhguru does not teach, does not preach that drinking cow milk is a problem. Fascinating.
Or in other words, you never consume a mammal because it is too close to you and its memory is too complex and you will never be able to break it down 100%. If you consume this, partly you break down the genetic code, another part of it remains.
Why do you think it is that eating the cow's flesh is forbidden? Because of this rationale that you're going to take on the cow's DNA, but drinking the cow's milk, he has so much to teach us, this complete nincompoop. Sadhguru, look him up. If you haven't heard of him, you'll be horrified.
See, if individual people, out of their insensitivity, they want to eat whatever they want to eat, it's not my business. You want to cut a cow in your house and eat, I will not interfere.
If you don't milk the cow, it will go straight to the slaughterhouse. That's where it's going. That's where they're all going. Those who don't have milk, those who don't have the ability to work, that's where they're going. So,
the thing is about self-evident moral truths, they're only self-evident to people who already believe in them. And if you can just get people to slow down and stop and examine their assumptions from a detached perspective, they'll start to realize that they've constructed the known universe out of a whole bunch of seemingly reliable moral certainties that really are quite unreliable. Is that a good way to put it? Look, all my life, people invoke the name of the Vietnam War. Vietnam. Learn the lessons of history. Vietnam. As if this has some self-evident moral truth packaged up just in that one word, Vietnam. Don't even bother to read the Wikipedia article. Don't bother to read a book about the history of Vietnam. Just don't think about Vietnam. Don't you know? War doesn't solve problems. Vietnam. Violence doesn't solve problems. Vietnam. Don't you know? People, good-looking young women with big breasts and revealing clothing holding signs above their head, that's what changes the world. You want evidence? Vietnam! What ended the Vietnam War? There's a bunch of half-naked chicks with face paint on, half the time topless, in those Time magazine photos. That's what ended the Vietnam. This one word, just invoking it, it solves so many moral problems, so many political problems. It brings in this sense of moral certainty to our lives. And you know what the truth is? There are over 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today. And the 95 million of them who are living in Vietnam, they don't have democracy. They don't have freedom of speech. They don't have human rights. They don't have any of the things that are taken for granted in South Korea and Japan. And you know what the difference is? South Korea was conquered by the United States of America with tremendous violence, unspeakable violence. But when the violence was over, they created the democratic society we have today in South Korea. You know how the wonderful democratic society we have in Japan was created? Similar story. So if you could travel back in time, to about 1974, somebody asked you, hey, what do you think we should do with this Vietnam War thing? You're a time traveler. You're from the future. You know how it goes. Do you think it's cool for us to just wrap this up and go home, and for us to just give up and let 100 billion people, approximately, have no human rights, no democracy, no freedom of speech, no economic rights? The economic rights are worth something too, by the way, especially when you're talking about a period of time, many decades long. Talking about 30, 40 years, the economic rights start to matter. Okay? Do you think the United States of America should just pack up and go home? Or do you think it would be possible to kill another 500,000 people? To get out there and murder, let's just forget people. Let's say murder 500,000 innocent civilians, so that 100 million people in Vietnam could have democracy, freedom of speech, human rights, all the things the Japanese and South Koreans take for granted. I'm not saying it could be paradise. South Korea and Japan, pretty close to paradise compared to the reality of what Vietnam is today. If we could just kill another 500,000 people to accomplish it, you think that's a good policy move for the United States of America in 1974? Complicated, isn't it? Complicated when you go past the thought-terminating cliche of just invoking this one word, Vietnam, to think ethically about what these things really mean and their consequences. You know what? There are a whole lot of issues within veganism that vegans are wrong about. There are a whole lot of issues in veganism where I actively, over a 5-year period, investigated, interrogated, questioned, and even mocked my fellow vegans for being laughably wrong about so many things. But you know what, Hindus? You know what? If you really just stop and let yourselves think about it, you're going to realize you're in the wrong on this issue. I know it makes you feel good to throw this in our face and say, how dare you be so morally self-righteous? How dare you presume to know the difference between good and evil? Wouldn't it be a wonderful world if instead of you preaching at me or me preaching at you, we could go along hand in hand and try to find out together? If we could, what's that phrase? Learn truth from facts.
I'm not against veganism, but the way some vegan activists approach as if they're the absolute right and everyone else who disagree with them are evil. The cows here in the ashram are kept in a way how cows were kept in old traditional homes.
So it's no problem. So would we bring back slavery if you assured me that you were going to treat the slaves the same way you used to in old-fashioned Indian homes? How were the slaves treated at ashrams? Was that really great? Oh no, wait. See how that works? Some people are opposed to slavery absolutely in principle, no matter how traditional it may be, no matter how much you may reassure me that in your household or your religious tradition, you treated the slaves just fine. By the way, both Hinduism and Buddhism have a really long history of slavery. Nobody likes to talk about it. Either you're opposed to slavery or you're not. Either you're opposed to raising a cow in captivity so that you can squeeze the milk out of its breasts and feed it to humans, or you are...
Even today in my village home, we have cows. And the activists say making cows work is cruel. Well, if we don't make the cows work, then they will end up in the slaughterhouse.
And I suppose you could never abolish slavery because if you don't put the slaves to work, they'll all starve to death. Makes sense, right? Yeah, what do you know? It turns out complex social change, legislation, new social policy, it's not really something you can shrink down to this kind of simplistic, thought-terminating cliche. Either you want to live in a society where millions of people are at all times raising, exploiting, killing, and eating tens of millions of animals, or you do not. How you're going to accomplish that transformation over the next 100 years, over the next 300 years, might take a little bit of imagination. Abolition of slavery also didn't happen in a day.
There's a vegan activist YouTuber who says Sadhguru is spreading the message to his millions of followers to continue animal abuse. He's funding and encouraging others to fund animal abusive industries like dairy industry. Well, these are big words. Just because you have a YouTube channel doesn't mean you can say anything for views.
Yes, it does. That's precisely what having a YouTube channel means. Having a YouTube channel means I can say anything for views.
So according to you, the whole Indian spiritual community is fake.
And I suppose you could never abolish slavery because if you don't put the slaves to work, they'll all starve to death. Makes sense, right? This is hammy even by my standards.